Hello and welcome to the Alpha Movement Podcast and another episode of the Mindset RX series, where I, Tom Foxley, am extracting the mindsets of the functional fitness world's best athletes and coaches, as well as some experts on neuroscience, psychology, and mindset in general. The teachings from the Mindset RX series are going to be compiled into a book called the Mindset RX book for functional athletes and coaches to master their inner athlete and create a champ's mindset. Now, a quick apology about how inconsistent these podcasts have been recently. There are plenty on the way. In fact, at the same time I'm uploading this one, I'm going to be uploading another 2 to release for the next 2 weeks. One with Julien Pineau and Richard Aceves from StrongFit, and one with Brian Mackenzie, which I recorded yesterday. On today's episode, though, I'm joined by Patrick Vellner, third place finisher at last year's CrossFit Games. I won't get into too much of Pat's backstory as we go into it in some detail in the show. It's safe to say, though, that the mindset that allows him to compete at the highest stage in CrossFit, or the biggest stage in CrossFit, has been learned and earned. The stories he tells are indicative of a champ, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how Pat does in this year's games. Don't forget, you can watch all these podcasts live on my Facebook profile, apart from Brian's yesterday, which tech issues stopped it from happening, but as well as receiving some unique content I put up for the people who follow me. So if you head over to Facebook and find me, Tom Foxley, or find my page, The Alpha Movement, which is at facebook.com/Alpha Movement Official, or you can find me at Instagram too, then you can get access to all of that. Now, let's enjoy the show with Mr. Patrick Vellner. And let's say welcome to the show. It's a real pleasure to have you on.
Thanks a lot, Tom. It's nice to be here.
All right, and just say in public as well, congratulations again. It's a huge achievement, especially when the regionals were different to usual without any barbells. So well done getting there. Yeah,
thanks very much. I thought it was fun. It was a cool change. It was every workout was something new. It was not the good old fashioned CrossFit everybody's been doing. So it was exciting.
How did that throw your prep for the games, or for the for the regionals?
You know what? It's funny actually. I went in training the other day and I was doing some weightlifting, and probably the first big weightlifting session I've done in a while, and it just beat the shit out of me. And then I got thinking about it, and it had probably been almost a month since I'd done any real barbell weightlifting, which is way longer than I've taken a hiatus from in the past. But I think it was interesting. It added a few elements. It made it more challenging to actually prepare, because right off the bat, like, I didn't even have 80-pound dumbbells around. Like, I didn't have a sandbag to train with. I didn't have XYZ of all these elements that we were going to have to do. So you've got to really just kind of improvise and try to simulate it as best you can. But I think everyone's in the same boat. Maybe if you're one of the last weeks, you've had time to order some 150-pound kettlebells if you wanted them or something, right? But everyone's just improvising, rigging up these like tying ropes short, like taping dumbbells together, and it was fun to see the scramble and do that. But I thought it made the prep interesting. Like, it was more like what CrossFit Games training is like, where you're moving a lot of different objects. It's more like strongman stuff, different things that you've never done before. So I actually really enjoyed it. I think that makes it a little more fun. And especially when you know that everyone's in the same boat, it's not like you're really handicapped in any way because you don't have this stuff, because no one else does really either. And it was every workout was something new and something different, and you sort of had to roll with that. And I mean, we had been doing some dumbbell training for the last while. I mean, since dumbbells got announced in the Open, I don't think it was any big surprise to anyone to see them come up at the regional, and they will come up again at the games. And I think that if you haven't been doing it, you've been doing yourself a disservice, because it just sort of, it seems to me that it was quite obvious that this was going to be a trend this year. And so you just have to try to prepare yourself and do as many different variations of dumbbell movements and whatever that you can. So it was fun. Like, I thought it was interesting, and it gave the athletes a new look to the competition. And I don't know how it looked from an outsider, from a spectator point of view, but some of the events I thought were still very exciting. And I know some people are just hated on it because they love the barbells and didn't like that there wasn't any real heavy elements tested. But at the end of the day, you have probably 75% of the athletes who went through are the same people who were there last year. Like, the people who are the fittest athletes are still getting through regardless. And we'll see. I'm sure they'll test some heavier stuff at the games, I'm sure, and make up for it.
Yeah, super refreshing to see from a spectator's view. And also, like you said, doing yourself a disservice as an athlete, and also just as a human being as well. Apparently it's good to move stuff that isn't just a barbell.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of training, right? If you're going to try to be well-rounded and be ready for anything, that's sort of, you got to do it every day.
Oh, exactly. It's back to true CrossFit.
Yeah.
So we're talking before about how you kind of develop the mental toughness skills and the consistency from such a young age. But can you just touch upon, like, I know you played lacrosse at a high standard and also gymnastics at a very high standard, and you competed in gymnastics, at a high standard. So can we touch on how demanding that was as an athlete and the skills that you think you took into competing in CrossFit?
Yeah. So it's a lot of different skills that I built up as a kid, I think have helped me be successful, not just in CrossFit, but in general in my life. And so when I started competing at a very young age in gymnastics and probably competed for about 15 years. So gymnastics is a high technical, high skill sport. You're being coached very technically all the time. And it's grueling. I'm training 4 hours at least a day, probably 25 plus hours a week from the time I was like 10 to the time I was 20. So it's a lot of work. And when you're balancing that with school, and I was still playing lacrosse at the time, like my days consisted of like getting up in the morning, go to class, go to the gym, do gymnastics for 4 hours, have an hour break, and then play lacrosse for a couple hours, then go home and go to sleep. So the skills you build as far as even just time management, like where do I get my schoolwork done? How do I keep myself sustained? How am I going to sleep? How am I going to do whatever? I think it helped me so that now when I'm balancing still a school schedule with trying to train for the games and train for regionals, I'm able to still do that. And I think, like I said, I was saying earlier, in gymnastics particularly, and when you're young, you're starting in gymnastics at a very young age, it teaches you a lot of good discipline and a lot, like it's a well-balanced sport with a lot of flexibility, strength, endurance, etc. But I think more than anything, it just teaches you how to be coached, how to deal with failure, because most of the time in gymnastics, like honestly, you spend 99% of your time falling on your ass. Like no joke, you fall 200 times before you ever do anything right. And so you learn to deal with failure and get back up and immediately dissect your performance and say, what did I do that made me fall? Like, what did I do wrong there? How can I change that? What can I do different next time? And you learn to take cues from coaches very well. So when I built up those habits, and that's just what my headspace is like, when you go to segue into any other sport, that just like, that's there, it clicks right away. So as soon as anything bad happens, it's not the end of the world. Like that just is part of sport to me. And you just have to figure out what to do next time and what you're going to do to make that better. So I've always sort of been like that. And I mean, it's very different gymnastics and lacrosse for me just because it's an individual sport versus a team sport. And I would consider that my gymnastics career has helped me in CrossFit much more than lacrosse did, but it's just different skills. And I mean, like that, I think that sort of mentality is mostly the biggest thing that segues.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Were there any tools that you took across from gymnastics that helped you focus or maintain focus, especially kind of on the visualization side of things as well? Because I know some people do huge amounts of visualization and some people don't. So what's your view on that?
Yeah, actually, my mom was asking me about that this morning when we were eating breakfast. Yeah, actually, I still do that. It was a big part of competing in gymnastics, of course. And I think a lot of gymnastics and CrossFit are very similar in the sense that in gymnastics, I would compete 6 events in a day, and one could go very poorly, but it doesn't matter. Like you still have to compete the next events, and you can still win medals for your next events, but maybe your all-around score is all of a sudden trashed. So it's the same in CrossFit, where if you fail at something, you need to pick yourself up and move on, right? So that visualization, I think, helps sometimes to just whatever. If you've done something poorly or you've made a mistake, it's fine, but you need to put that in your head and start thinking right away of the next event and really feel how you're going to improve. I do it a lot. I sometimes find if I'm competing, when I go like at night, when I go to sleep, I don't often in the day do much of it, but when I go to bed, I do a lot of it. And like if I'm preparing for the Saturday events, say, and I know what they are at regional. Sometimes at the games you don't, but I'll find like if I'm having trouble sleeping, you're always doing that, and my head's spinning, and it's just like, okay, well, I find that if I just stop and I run through all the events of that day, start to finish, like completely through the whole thing in real time, and that in my head, then I can get it off my head. But if I don't do that, it'll I try to like think of something else for 5 minutes. I'll be right back there in no time. And it keeps spinning, and you just kind of, then you don't sleep. Right. So it'll help me move on to something else if I can just flow through it and be done with it and say like, this is how it's going to be, this is how it's going to feel. And then just put the period at the end of it and just say like, okay, I'm done.
Are you visualizing from a third person perspective or a first person perspective? Because some people see it from outside, some people see it from inside. And is it just a visual thing, or are there other kind of more tactile cues or audible cues that you might pay attention to?
I sometimes use tactile cues. Obviously, if I'm sleeping, then not so much. But occasionally, like if I'm actually up, you'll just move. Like if you're doing a deadlift, like move a little bit like you were doing a deadlift. But I don't know. As far as first person, third person, I mix and match a little bit. I try as much as I can to use first person just because I think it's more practical. I think I have a tendency sometimes, if I'm visualizing third person, I visualize someone else.
Okay.
And then I'm like, okay, well, this is irrelevant. Like if I'm visualizing Matt Fraser doing this workout, like great, it'll be great, but that's fine. It doesn't help me any. So, yeah, I'd say I'm sometimes split on that, but I try my best to use first person. I think it's more practical.
And have you ever spent time visualizing the end goal?
Very little. I have, but I think that I not so much. I don't know why, really. Like, I just don't know if it's like a hugely... It depends. I try not to get caught up in outcomes, because you can perform the best you ever possibly could have imagined and still come short just based on what everybody else brings to the table. You have no idea.
Yeah.
So it's hard. Like I have a bad habit of thinking about that and thinking about, okay, like my goal is obviously to qualify for the games, but again, I could have my best performance ever and not make it. So it's a bit challenging sometimes. I do think about it, but when I try to visualize end goals, I don't think I visualize like standing on the podium or anything like that. I just like, it's irrelevant. If you visualize your events and you do whatever you can do in that takes care of itself a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's a super healthy position to hold. My last interview was actually Brent Fikowski. Yeah. So he said a very similar thing, being obsessed with the process and being interested in the process more. Yeah. So.
And it's hard because it like, whether you like it or not, you're measured against other people. Yeah. So and the definition of success that's broadcast through the sport is like, you qualify for the games. How do you do at the games? And it's so year to year, like it's so transient that it's really hard. Like the pressure is on you. And I mean, this year, particularly for me, like I had a great year last year, but it's such a small sample size. And coming into this season, everyone's like, yeah, no, Vellner's going to probably push Fraser around a bit. And I'm like, what the fuck? So I walked into the competition thinking, holy shit. And you don't know what everybody says or what everybody brings to the table, like I said. So I felt like I was prepared, but I don't know. Like I haven't seen any of these other guys compete, some of them ever. And so you're just, like, what can you do? I think it's really hard to, I mean, all the talking heads are saying stuff like that. And you're like, man, I better qualify. But at the end of the day, it'll take care of itself as long as you can manage yourself and manage your anxiety and your performance and put all the pieces together. Like it'll work out.
So there's two things that I want to touch on there. But firstly, let's go for measuring anxiety weighing anxiety before you compete. Have you got any tactics for that, or has anyone ever taught you that actually?
I think that it's a skill that comes with practice. I don't think there's any secret to it. Like I don't think they just say, oh, think of your happy place. Like that's not a thing. Maybe it is for some people. I don't know. But I think that everyone manages anxiety differently. And again, going back to gymnastics taught me from a young age how to manage pressure in a situation, because you can do your routine 100 times perfectly in training, but you have one chance in competition. And if you fall down, that doesn't matter. All the times you did it perfectly doesn't matter. All that matters is you fell now. So you have to learn to execute under pressure. And when you have one chance, that's it. So I learned to deal with that pressure. And I think it's more pressure in that context than it is in CrossFit. Because oftentimes in CrossFit, if you make a mistake, you get a no rep, like you might lose a second or two, which sometimes can be costly, but oftentimes it's not the end of the world. So, but how you deal with it might be. Yeah. So anyway, I find that I get anxious before I compete. Always. It doesn't even matter if we were like training the regional events and I was at the gym by myself, I would get anxious before we started. And I think it's when you know that there's some weight behind what you're doing and this now holds value, it's healthy to be a little bit anxious. It means that you care about what you're doing. It means that you're putting some value in what you're doing. And if you don't care, then like get off the floor, give some room to somebody who does. So I think that to have a certain degree of anxiety is very important, but how you manage it is also important. So when things go wrong, you can't crumble. You have to really keep moving forward and try to keep your head on your shoulders. But I found that I'm okay. I'm anxious until you hear about that 10-second countdown, and then it's like it's go time, and you flip the switch, and you're trained for it. Like everybody's prepared for it. Everyone on the floor has done this before, and you know what to expect, and you know roughly what you're capable of. So it's just time to show everyone, right? And I think that's what you have to remember is that oftentimes people are like beating themselves up over mistakes or whatever. And like realistically, a competition is just like, it's time to just show everyone what you've done. Like this is where you've trained and whatever, and it's time to shine. Like this is where you get to show off. And so if you treat it that way a little bit, it takes the pressure off. Like you're not trying to prove yourself so much. You're trying to just like show off what you've worked for. So. Yeah.
Was there anyone in your, because most people, as you said, kind of learn that ability, and they either learn it through repetition or they learn it from an outside source. Was there anyone, either a coach or a fellow athlete or someone that you admired at a young age, that taught you that?
I don't know. I think my gymnastics coaches certainly helped. And I think to a certain degree, repetition and failure teaches a lot of lessons. So I couldn't tell you again the amount of times that I've messed up or I've made mistakes in competition, and I've done it sometimes and let it weigh on me and totally scrapped my whole competition. And I've done it before and tried to like move past it and just focus on what's next, and managed to come back and do quite well. So I've experienced the highs and the lows a little bit and seen what works. My older brother as well was a gymnast, a trampolinist at a very high level, and I think we worked through a lot of that together growing up, and we're very different kinds of people. He's a lot more disorganized and sort of all over the place. So it's interesting to see how he would manage it versus I tended to be a little bit harder on myself, but he was very successful. So I think I learned a little bit from him about how to just relax and let it fly. And just, if you're prepared, you're prepared. And just like, you've done it a million times, it's just time to show it. So.
Yeah, exactly. And how do you like go around, or do you go about preparing yourself for competition whilst you're training, or is competition and training a very separate event for you, in as much as, do you imagine yourself competing when you're training, or do you kind of have them as two separate entities?
I think it depends. I think in general, training throughout the year, training and competition are two very different things. I think competing in and of itself is a skill. I think the more you compete, the better you get at it, because things like that environment doesn't get to you. You're able to just do what you need to do and be like a more objective body on the floor. So I think that's certainly an acquired skill, and you can't say enough about that. But when it comes to something like training for the regionals, when you have the events, I think like that's like having the answers to the test. Like if you are going to run through those events, you can generally anticipate what sort of transitions they're going to build in and how the event's going to run, if you can picture what a competition floor looks like. So I think the closest you can simulate a competition setup in training, and if you can get people to do it with you and just whatever, like have somebody right beside you doing it and just staying focused on what you're doing and not people next to you. If you have people counting your reps, throw in a random no rep every now and then, just see how you figure it out. Those things are valuable and certainly stimulating a competition experience. But for most of the year, I don't think you really do. Like even this time of year, training for the games, it's just like a lot. The volume's gone up. It's a lot of grunt work. A lot of it is just getting through, trying to hit your percentages, trying to get through these workouts, training different skills that you may have put down for part of the year, so that you can make time for other things that are going to be more relevant to get you to the games. But yeah, I'd say basically the main one would be for the regionals, where it's like you actually can simulate a competition experience, and so you should, because that's where it matters. I mean, it's if you have the answers to the test and you don't look like, I don't know. Like everybody's got them. So it's just like, you might as well. The other regions get to watch us go and see what we do, see what works, see what doesn't work, practice several different things. Like if you don't do that, I don't know, like you should be doing everything you can do to get through. But yeah, I think it's kind of the only stage of competition, in my opinion, that you can really simulate that, except for doing like past games workouts or things like that. But
that makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. I think that's a really healthy approach again. Something that we've kind of skirted around, and I've heard other athletes just touch upon it and then come back to it, but we've never really gone in depth on the podcast, is comparing yourself to others. How do you just focus on yourself, and B, use others' performances to aid yours and see where you need to be? Or is it just like a sole focus on, I'm doing this, I'm just going to do the best I can?
My opinion on it is that a lot of people will tell you that you focus solely on yourself and that's the way you have to do it, but no one does that. I think that regardless of what people might say, the reality is that we're measured against each other. So if you want to be successful, I have to beat Matt Fraser. I know that. Like it's not a surprise. It's not a secret. Like it's challenging because sometimes the way events or point systems shake out, it might feel inaccurate or something like that. But like, this is the game we're playing. This is the sport we're playing. It's all the same rules. Like you got to play the game. So, yeah, like in your training, you have to be aware of what you need to improve on to be better. And that comes down to like looking at your event finishes, looking at your strengths and weaknesses, and seeing where you need to make moves. But when it comes to competition, like if you don't know who's in front of you, who's behind you, who you have to beat, I think you have a painful lack of awareness, and like you need to fix it. That would be one of your weaknesses you should improve on. But like, yeah, I mean, this year at the regional is a perfect example. Like our region had Matt and I in it. And I think after all regionals had gone with all regional scores, we're still number 1 and number 2 all around. And I think that's not by accident. Like I think having Matt in my region made me number 2. I don't think that I would have been as fast or been as good in certain events had he not been there. So I think you do to a certain degree elevate your performance to the level of the competition. And I think that, yeah, like sometimes you can compare yourself to other people, but you're very different athletes. So it's not like you need to beat a certain guy. Like take, for example, if we were in the same regional, Brent would have still smashed me in that chipper in event 3. Like I know that he's amazing at that sort of stuff. Certain things like that, like I can't look at that and compare myself to him. I have to be like, okay, I have to stay close to him, maybe do whatever I can do to get through that. But at the end of the day, you need to make up your points somewhere else. And you do need to try to make moves to beat these athletes. Like that is what the sport is. So you want to put your best performance forth possible, but if you want to be successful, like you do need to be aware of that sort of stuff. And you are trying to beat these guys. So, I mean,
So do you have people like that in your training environment, someone to take you up, like either specialists in certain events or certain energy systems that you think, right, like that person I'm going to catch on this, or is it kind of a solo effort when you're training?
Often I train by myself just because of my school schedule and whatnot. I don't usually have anybody with me, which sucks. But when I can, I do get a few. Like we have one guy at my gym is like a former national level swimmer and just big, tall guy, unreal engine, right? So if we're ever doing anything that's like rowing and wall balls or things like that, I want to stand right next to him and do that next to him, because he'll beat me at that, but it'll pull me along a lot more. And so I'll push myself more having had him next to me. So there are a few people around in my area or my gym that I'll try to do that with. If I know I have a certain piece that maybe I'm weak in this area, I'll find someone who's good at it and do it with them. But yeah, a lot of the times I'm by myself, which is a shame.
Okay. And how do you ramp yourself up? Because like I think that's something a lot of people who want to get to a regionals level struggle with. They're stuck training by themselves, and they think, like, obviously it's as you know, you perform better generally when you're competing against someone, or when you've got someone to compare yourself to, or when you're just in an environment that's a bit more energetic. So how do you maintain focus to that time, and how do you kind of amp yourself up ready to hit go time?
I think it's a little bit dependent. I know some athletes really perform better in pressure situations and with people, and some actually are the opposite. So it's not necessarily across the board. I think having a training partner day in and day out is super helpful, if for nothing else than just you have someone to share that time with, and it's a social time, and you can it's more fun. It'll keep you coming back to the gym because you just actually can enjoy it. Like some days, if you're coming in and you're by yourself and you've had a long day, it's a bit of a chore, and it shouldn't be. So some days I'm kind of just getting the reps in, and it's hard to maintain that intensity. Like it really is. You have to think about why you're doing it. Think about what a guy like Brent would be doing on this workout. Be like, man, like you have to maybe use your imagination a little bit and see if you can push yourself when you want to stop, because Fraser wouldn't be stopping, Brent wouldn't be stopping. You know what I mean? So it is hard. The best you can do is find yourself a good training partner and try to do that. And otherwise, like, there's no other easy way to do it. Like it comes from you. Like you have to be intrinsically motivated to do it. If it takes having a bunch of people next to you for you to put in any kind of work, then like maybe it's not for you, because at the end of the day, like you've got to do a lot of the work, and you've got to do it by yourself and for yourself. So, I mean, that's what the sport is. Like sometimes it's hard.
Yeah, of course. So on that note, do you have a why? Do you have something you're training for, or do you have a big why behind what you train for?
Not really, actually. I started just because I competed forever, and then I was about a year out of gymnastics and just sort of exercising to exercise and like stay in shape because I knew it's good for me. And then I met some guys who were doing CrossFit and kind of made friends with them and started training with them. And I like having challenges all the time, and I like it's a good outlet for my competitiveness, and it's a good way. Everything's so quantifiable that I can come in every day and have something I can be better at. Like there's no world that I'm the best at everything in. So you just can come in every day and have some sort of a new challenge, and you can feel small successes regularly, and you can just use small stepping stones, and you can measure your success so easily. So I think it's just such a tangible thing, and it's got such measurable success that it was fun. And then obviously I had some success in it, and it was like, oh, this is sweet. It's fun to be good at something. So I think I had a lot of fun when I started competing at like the regional level. And it's just like, I really enjoy competing, I think, a lot more than I enjoy training. But training is just, that's what you have to do to compete. And I think I do what I have to do to compete, stay at the level I need to be at. But I don't know. There's no real why, I don't think. I just like it.
Yeah, fair one. I think that's just as good a reason as any.
Yeah.
The main reason, or the post that you put out that got me in touch with you was about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And how you feel about, because everyone gets it, whether people are accountants or policemen or CrossFit athletes, we all get it. We all don't feel, or podcast hosts, we all don't feel like we're capable, and we're kind of gaming it a bit. So yeah, how has that come into play with your athletic career, and how have you coped with it?
So I think, I don't know if it stems from gymnastics where you're graded and you're scored on everything you do. Maybe, I don't know, but like, you're right. I think everybody does feel it to a certain degree at some point or another. And, I find that in sports particularly, that sort of thing is just viewed as weakness, and people either ignore it or hide it or don't want to admit it. So part of the reason behind putting that post out is there's a lot of athletes that are out there who don't feel like they're good enough, or on the cusp maybe of making regionals or moving around, and they are really hard on themselves. And I think it's the sort of thing that is inherent in any area, because you get better at things by being hard on yourself, by looking for flaws and improving on yourself. Like that sort of thing is key to self-improvement. But if you are too hard on yourself and you just sort of put yourself in this downward spiral of despair, like it's really tough. And so it just kind of was a way for me to show that, like, this isn't an abnormal thing. Like, it's not just you that feels self-doubt. Like, if you feel like this, sometimes it's fine. It's okay to own up to that and be open about it. Like I said, a lot of times it feels like it gets hidden, and it's just, that's part of it. It's not easy all the time, and it's hard to admit that, but like it's fine. Like it's totally fine, and you're fine. And so I was talking with my older brother about it because he's experienced that a bit. He works in the Cirque du Soleil now, and he's experienced a bit of that, and with himself and with other acrobats who are exceptional at what they do, obviously. But they come in and you watch them do something, and you're like, wow, that was amazing. And they're like, oh yeah, well, like so-and-so is doing this though. And so you're constantly measuring against other people. And I think particularly in CrossFit, it's hard because social media reigns supreme in everything we do. So every time I log into Facebook, I see another guy snatching 300 pounds, and I'm like, oh God, like how am I going to beat this? But nobody shows real life. Like you show your highlight reel, you show the best version of yourself. And you should. Like, why would you not want to? But I think you have to remember that that's the best version of themselves. It's so easy to see that. You see the best version of everyone else, and you see the worst version of yourself because you're always seeing the holes that you have and how you want to improve. So I felt it a lot last year after the games, like, because I never did anything exceptional. I just sort of like didn't mess up all weekend. Finished a lot of top 10s, had a couple top 5s maybe, but just like floated across, even keeled, and then finished in third. And I just like, I left the competition feeling like I didn't really win anything, like I just didn't lose. And so I sort of felt like that. And then it's the off season, and I was sort of like, oh, well, cool, finished third. And then again, coming back around to like the open announcement, and it was like Brent and I was like, shit, like I hope I can beat him. Like, I don't know. I haven't competed most of the year. Like, I don't know what people are like. It's a year later, and all of a sudden I have to back this up, and I haven't really thought about it. So, and like one step at a time, it just keeps being fine. I was fine in the open announcement. I was fine in the open. I was fine in regionals. Like, but it just, I think every time I move into a new stage, that's always in my head. Like, I don't know what everyone else is bringing to the table. It's been a long time. I don't know if I'm like, I feel like I wasn't even that good last year. Like, why would I be that good this year? So anyway, it's something that, again, you can always find a problem and always find a hole. And I find that I'm often that way. I'll walk off the competition floor, be great, finish like whatever. This year at regional, say like finish first on the event 4, and then walk off and it's like, man, I kind of messed up my pacing. I had a hard time on those last few deadlifts. Like, you always right away, no matter what, if the varying degrees of success are, I'm always able to find something I could improve on. So that's just kind of, like I said, I think it makes me good because regardless of what I'm doing, I know I can improve, and I'll try to improve. But again, like I said, if you take it too hard and to too big of a degree, it can be crippling. So it's just important to remember, you just keep putting one foot in front of the other. You're not the only one who struggles with that, and it's a real thing.
That's perfectly said, man. I think that's a message that more people need to hear. We're hardwired to be negative, and we're hardwired to solve problems because it kept us alive. And like it's find that balance of the positive and the realism, and somewhere in the center lies perspective. So it seems like gone.
I had my brother told me when we were talking about it that one of the problems is that people measure themselves from the finish line instead of from the start line.
Yeah.
So that was a good analogy to make, where it's like, if you're constantly measuring yourself from where you want to be, it's sometimes hard. But if you just turned around and looked at how far you came to get where you are now, like you're making leaps and bounds every day. And it's just that you keep setting loftier and loftier goals. So it looks like you're pushing the finish line farther and farther away, but you got to remember that you're still getting better, and it's not that bad.
Yeah. So there's like you're bang on there, and half people will be down one side where they'll focus on where they want to get to, when they want to get to, and they need to look back at what they've achieved. And other people will be looking so far back, like, I've come all this way, and they forget to have an objective. So generally better athletes are more on that. Where am I going? So looking back and counting wins is super important for that. To change topic massively, what does your self-talk look like or sound like when you're competing?
Pretty bad.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah. I've had some people ask me that before. I'm like pretty negative self-talk.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm like trying to beat myself down, and then I'm trying to prove myself wrong. But I don't know. I actually have pretty bad self-talk. Okay. So I don't know what it is.
What does that sound like? I'm curious.
I do a lot of whining about like how hard it is, and like sometimes when you're halfway through something and be like, man, like you might have started too fast. Like this is hard. This is going to get really bad soon. And like, you know what I mean? I do a lot of that. So it's okay. Like I get through it, and I know before I do certain workouts, if I see something written and it looks like, I know I've done enough workouts, I know what's going to hurt me and what's going to be not so bad. And so I'll look at some stuff and I'll bitch about it for like 5-10 minutes and then I'll do it and it's fine. I don't know if it's like a defense mechanism to help me sort of take my stress down a little bit. But I'm whining about everything all the time.
And does that change in events where you crush it?
Not really. Honestly, I think it's funny again, if I'm going into an event that I know I can win, it's almost worse because I'm like, fuck, I better win this. Like I have no reason not to. If I screw this up and I don't win, it's because like I messed up. So it's almost better. I almost put more pressure on myself when I know I can be really great at something. Whereas if you're hoping to maybe just get through it and have a reasonable amount of success, anything feels great. But that's one of the hard parts about expectation is like if I'm expecting to do really well, I'm worried that I'm just going to you can just let yourself down. And then if you do really well, it's not like it was an extra success. It's like that was what you expected to do. So you come out even. Whereas if you do anything less than, you come out underneath, right? So I need to change that a little bit. Like I think in general, I just need to start having more confidence and more being more aggressive because like that's what I need to do to be more successful than I am now. I'm fine at like just following the leader and finishing in like the top 3, but I need to start being able to lead the pack and be able to go out hard and hang on and be aggressive and win things and start having that expectation. But for now, I'm not great at that. I'm working on it.
That sounds interesting. That is super interesting. Have you tried anything to try and change that?
Not much. I've tried just changing my approach in certain training and like training for certain workouts and stuff. But in general, I'm not a flying die kind of athlete. Like I don't come out very aggressive and I don't do that. And I think that makes people successful. Pacing is super important, but I tend to be over conservative. Mm-hmm. So I need to just learn to toe that line every now and then. And if I end up in training crashing and burning every now and then because I went a little too far, that's fine. It's training. It doesn't matter, right? Yeah. But that's what training's for. Yeah. But it's easy to then you measure your success in training and you're like, man, like had I broke this up, I would have been a minute faster. Like, but whatever. Now you know where your line is, right? So I've been working a bit more at that since the end of the games last year. So because that's what I felt like was one of my biggest shortcomings. Is I was a bit overwhelmed, I think, and just over conservative on everything. Like I didn't want to.
It's always going to.
I just didn't want to make mistakes, right? So that's
exactly. It's always going to be a new experience and a like crazy experience at that time. Is there anyone in the sport who really you look up to in terms of maybe their mindset or just their work ethic or something like that?
I think I like the way Matt does things. Honestly, Fraser he's one hell of an athlete and he's unapologetic about it. I think he works really, really hard. And he doesn't come out and pretend to like, I don't know. He seems so real. He comes out and he'll just like, he wins events. And when people ask him like, oh, how did you work? Or like, how did you get so much better at running? How did you whatever? He's like, are you kidding me? I did nothing but run for the last year. Like there's no magic. And a lot of people are like always trying to spread their success around a lot, which is important. It takes a lot of people to make you successful. Coaching or otherwise, but at the end of the day, like you got to show up and do work. If you don't, it's going to show. So I think the way that he takes credit for his own achievements, I think is awesome. And you just don't see that very often. I think it's people ask him like how this and this happens. And he's like, well, it's because I'm at the gym every day and I work hard and I don't take shortcuts and I do whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. So, I think he's great. So I had a lot of fun with him at regionals this year. He's a good guy to have around.
Yeah, of course. So some people have two different approaches to, or different types of people have different approaches to approaching intensity and embracing intensity. Some people will like focus very heavily on what exactly is happening now. Like it'll be a very present focus, and other people completely disassociate. And also that varies from event to event. Do you find you lean more from one side to the other? So you very focused on what's happening right now, or are you trying to think about something that's completely outside of it?
I would say I'm likely in the present one.
Yeah. Okay.
Like it's harder when things are very long. I think sometimes when things are very long, and particularly monostructural, if you're running for 2 hours, it's a bit easier to try to escape and do something else. But in the majority of the CrossFit world, you're moving from one movement to another, or you're doing like tangible reps every whatever. So I think it's easier to stay in what you're doing and just find a pattern or find a goal or a waypoint every time you're doing something. But yeah, just get to 10, just get to 20, like do this. And you can stepwise work your way through an event. But I think, yeah, I mean, as I said, depending on what you're doing, I would be dissociative a little bit in like the trail run last year or something like that.
Okay.
But it would depend a lot. I think that the majority is mostly that presence.
Yeah, of course. On the subject of the trail run, how did you find that? Because it's completely unexpected. Well, it was kind of completely unexpected. I think if you'd kind of looked at it, you might have seen something crazy like that coming up, because they always do. But how did you deal with something that's just completely away from barbells and rigs and wall balls?
It was cool. I thought it was right away when it comes up, you can kind of look around the room and you'd be like, that guy's kind of screwed and that guy's kind of screwed. And, you know who are good runners and who based on background, like who has done well in those sorts of events in the past. But I thought it was cool. It was interesting because no one had done the trail before, so we didn't know what to expect. There was actually, right when we started, everyone took off really fast, and I'm a reasonable runner, and I was like, no one's gonna survive this. So I just like faded to like the back, probably the bottom 10, and then we did the first like row it out and back, and it was just like a non-sustainable pace. And then we got up the first hill, and I started passing people on the hill, and then you go into this gully, and there was like a huge funnel bottleneck where you have to go through this ravine, and they like judges were there, and they'd only let you through one at a time, and you had to go through in the order you got there. So basically, if you booked out of the gates and got there first, you could walk through the ravine and get like a 2-minute rest and then just start running. So the people who went out hot were kind of rewarded. And the people who paced kind of appropriately off the start got kind of fucked, because you go there, and because it was men and women at once, you go there and you're behind like half the women's field, and you're just standing there. I was legit standing still for like almost a minute, just like trying to get into this thing. And then you get in and you're walking, and you're like, you'll walk for a couple minutes, and then you get out and it's like you haven't even done anything yet. So there was certainly, had you known that, there's a degree of strategy in it. I'm not sure if anybody knew it or if they just got kind of lucky, but yeah. So for the rest of the race, I was just chasing people and trying to pass, which is fine. It's easier to chase people than to be chased. I think sometimes you can just like pick a guy, pass him, pick the next guy, pass him, pick the next guy, pass him. So I just like climbed up for the rest of it, but it was crazy, and it was just so dirty. And like, if you were not near the front of the pack, anytime you went around a hill, it was just a dust bowl, and you're breathing in like dust. And it was a funny event, but it was hard. It was really hard. But, it was cool. Something different.
Was that the hardest moment of the games?
I don't know. I think it's hard to peg down a hardest moment of the games. It also depends on what you're good at and what you're bad at. So I think that was a hard one, because there's no real reason to stop or go slowly. Like, you can always keep putting one foot in front of the other. You know what I mean? Like, if you're on the squat clean pyramid and you cannot lift 305 pounds, it's hard to like watch everyone pass you and have a bad finish, but you just can't do it. You're limited by your capacity. Whereas in the run, like you're limited by your will a little bit, and that's it. Like, it sucks, and it's gonna suck for like 35 minutes, and that's how it was. So that one was really hard. Murph is similar to that too. Like, at a certain point though, if you're like failing push-ups, there's not much you can do. But you go to like run that last mile with the vest, and it's kind of just where's your guts? Like you just have to show up and do it. Like you're almost done. But yeah, other than that, I'm not a great swimmer either. The swim was hard for me. Just with the 80-person start, it was such a flail fest, and you're like getting punched, and it's like if you're already like not super comfortable, then like as soon as someone's pulling at your ankles and like dunking you, and it's like, oh, okay. So it was all right. There wasn't a lot of, yeah, I don't know. It depends. Like I said, I'm sure some people were super uncomfortable going upside down on those high rings, but I wasn't, right? So it's very dependent on what your skill set is.
What's the goal for this year?
I'd like to back my performance up last year, and I think I would be unhappy with anything out of the top 10. And I'd like to land on the podium again. I want to be perennial that way. I think that is realistic if I train properly and I'm prepared. But again, I don't want to get hung up on outcome based goals. But I think it'd be good. I'd like to be consistent like I was last year. I was pretty even across all events, like 11 top 10 finishes or something out of 15 events. So I think if I can do that, similarly shave a couple places here and there, I can be successful again. And mostly I want to do better in the swim event. I think that I have been working a bunch on that this year, and I'd like to be more successful in that and just make improvements in areas that I need them.
What approach have you used for swimming?
I've just been like trying to swim once a week, pretty much. There's a small pool at the school I go to, so I just once a week I'll get in and I'll just get some time with your face in the water and just get used to that breathing, get used to that movement, because I haven't done a lot of it. So
yeah,
I think as of now it'll pick up a little more. I'll start actually doing more specific swimming sessions, but in the last while it's just been like go in for 30-45 minutes of kind of continuous swimming and just get some time with your face in the water, really, like, because it gets you used to that breathing and stuff.
Nice. And do you have any daily routines, like something you do every day to set you up for success?
Not really. My days are fairly similar for a lot of the year just because of school. I'll kind of like go to school in the morning, go to the gym, then come back in the evening maybe to school. But a lot of the year it depends on school. And then for now, it's great. I finished school like a couple weeks ago and I'm off for sort of 2 months. So I can just focus on training, which is kind of boring. Mm-hmm. But I still don't put as much time into my recovery or things like that as I should. But I think as far as routines, I don't think there's much. I'll get up, I'll have a coffee in the morning, crack my knuckles, and get the day started.
Perfect. And have you ever tried meditation or anything like that?
Not really. I don't know. I think that like I lay down and I think enough at night when I go to sleep that I don't think I really need to do that. But certainly some people see a lot of benefit in it. I don't know. Sometimes training is my meditation time. If you're doing a lot of like long running or thing like that, you can just shut your brain off and think about whatever.
Yeah, definitely. And how do you balance like daily life? I'm guessing school is probably the best one to balance training with. But do you ever find it struggle to balance workload and training at the same time?
Yeah, it is challenging at times, and I get asked that a lot because there's a lot of people that are students and trying to compete at something, and you know what? It's just hard. Like the best thing you can do is manage your time really well. I'm lucky at my school, basically in anything pretty much post-secondary, a lot of lectures, like lecture hall type classes, you don't have to go to. Like they don't care if you're there or not. And nowadays, a lot of your resources are available online. So I just, quite frankly, I don't go to lectures. And I go to all my mandatory classes, go to my labs, go to my skill sessions, but I just don't go to lectures. Like I feel like I won't benefit from sitting in a lecture hall for 2 hours listening to someone talk. I'm just going to be like on Facebook anyways. So I might as well go put my time somewhere else. I can go train for a couple hours, then come back and do my assignments and do my work. So it's just about putting your time where you think it's going to be used the most effectively. And honestly, it's not perfect. Like at certain times of the year, my training takes a hit. At certain times of the year, my school takes a hit. And that's just the way it is. And if you want to be successful at both, like you have to kind of be aware of that. It's a bit of give and take. Like this year, actually last year, so I wrote like 8 exams right before regionals last year, and then went in just like wiped, right? It takes a lot out of you. It's high stress. This year I had a week of exams. I wrote a bunch before the regionals, and then when I came back from regionals, I had to write 4 exams back to back, and then I was done my school year, and everything was all done at once. But it's like I finished my exams prior to regionals, and like the 3 days prior to regionals, I just stopped doing school. It was like, oh, okay, I have to focus on training and focus on this, and I have to focus on qualifying for the games. Went through the weekend, didn't open a book at all. Was driving back from Albany on the Monday, and was just like freaking out. It's like, oh shit, I have to learn like this whole course material in a day and write the exam, then learn the next course material in a day, write that exam. And then so it was just, I just completely limped through the week. Like I'd just get kicked by an exam, crawl into the next one, get kicked again, crawl into the next one. And like, that's just how it was. That's how my school year ended. And it did not feel awesome. I got my results back and I did fine, but it was just, it did not feel good. You walk in and you just feel underprepared, and it sucks like that. And that's just, I knew that going in. So I worked really hard for the first half of the year, built myself up a buffer just in case things went poorly. And that's just what it is. It is what it is.
Awesome, man. And just to finish off, are there any books or resources that you found particularly useful that you kind of read related to CrossFit or not at all?
I haven't read any books related to CrossFit, but I've read a fair amount of like pop psychology, motivational books that are sometimes pretty good reads that are relevant to various different, like just not even just related to sport, but related to just kind of like life and motivation in general. I'm trying to think of one that I read recently, and I can't remember the title of it.
We can link to it in the show notes if you want.
Yeah, maybe. I'll see if it comes to me, but it was a book about motivation and about basically the science behind motivation and things like that. And so I found that book to be very interesting. I read it with school actually, and it was a good read. But I don't know, some things like that I'll read occasionally. I try to balance my reading with like one kind of fun escapist reading book, and then one sort of real applied book. But nothing that's really pops out of my head. If I think of the title of that one, I'll comment on it or something like that. Good
man. And I can't let you get away without asking about pec tests. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so I'm in school to be a chiropractor, so I have a reasonable amount of knowledge about this sort of stuff. And the way I see it, it's not the fault of the programming per se, and it's not the fault of the athletes. One of the issues right now going on is that CrossFit hasn't made a statement about it really, and then they were sort of using this crutch of saying like, well, no, I mean the athletes are supposed to be prepared for everything, and they were unprepared. And I don't think the athletes being unprepared was the problem. In fact, I think it was likely the opposite. And I think the other problem is then the athletes being like, well, it's not even the athletes, honestly. It's Joe, whoever on the internet saying, hey, this is a dangerous workout. And it is. Like, objectively looking at the stats, how many injuries happened across all regionals on the same workout, I think you can't deny that. But the athletes assume risk going into competition. Every athlete knows that there's a problem going in. And even in the third week, they knew that this was a risk of potential injury in this workout. And how many of them withdrew before the competition? Like, if you're competing to go to the games, like this is something that you just take on. That said, here's what I think was the issue. People train for these events. Like I said, you have the answers to the test. You're an idiot to not. This weekend had a lot of shoulders and a lot of pressing in it. So basically what happens is these athletes leading up to the competition are almost exclusively training movements that are going to be related to the regional and to allow them to be successful in the regional. That workout in particular, being a very short one with low volume, probably got trained a fair amount, like maybe not all the way through, but a lot of people practicing that dumbbell hand exchange, that cycling the ring dips, how they're going to be efficient with the ring dips. So effectively, in my opinion, what that did is it made everybody go into regionals with really tight shoulders and pecs. So now one of the issues that you have is people are not maybe warming up as much as they need to, or maybe just like, I don't know, even if they are, you still just are coming into the regional with really tight muscles. And so this workout was made to really, really fatigue your pecs out. Even when you lower the dumbbell, that's eccentric load on your pecs. When you do that ring dip, especially under a kip, when you come down, it's eccentric load, and then you're kipping up using mostly your legs. So you're pressing a bit, but when you come down, eccentric load is generally when most muscles tear. So by the time you get to your round of 15 or 9, your pecs are blasted from the dumbbell snatch and the ring dips. And then what happens in a kipping ring dip is that it's more uncontrolled descent than it would be in a strict ring dip, because you know you can rebound kind of out of the bottom and use your legs. So you get guys coming to the rings with, so now they have super tired, super tight pecs. The bottom of a ring dip is essentially max stretch of your pec. So you have people stretching their tired pec at a fast speed and eccentric load to max stretch, and it's already tight. And then they're trying to just snap out of the bottom. So I think it's something that looking at it after the fact, it's sort of a perfect storm of circumstances to cause injuries to pecs. They're not all tears either, like a lot of strains, things like that. It's been said that there's been like 30 pec tears, but that's not necessarily the case. But again, it's sort of a perfect storm of circumstances to allow for a pec related injury. But it's not something you ever would have thought. Like when I first saw that workout, the first thing that went through my head is not, oh man, everyone's pecs are going to tear. I looked at it and I thought, holy crap, that's a really fast workout. I'm going to have to move really fast on those ring dips and maybe try to go unbroken. So for the men, that was certainly the case. And everybody knew that, and that's how they attacked it. So I think that it was everybody coming in with tight overtrained pecs, and then when you try to do an eccentric load really fast when you're tired and just rebound out of the bottom, it's just, unfortunately, that's what happens. So I think the more uncontrolled people were coming down, so which often was the guys trying to go the fastest, now those are often the guys that ended up with some sort of an injury. So, and I mean, later in the regionals, you had guys with just training related injuries going in between that and the muscle ups and like all the overhead dumbbell holding and stuff like that. So it's a really unfortunate circumstance. It sucks to see everyone get hurt. And I mean, it really changed the dynamic of a lot of regionals with the certain guys that got hurt. Ours it for sure did. But I don't know. There's no, after it was 1 weekend, I didn't see them changing the workout. But just because for continuity's sake, but I think that perhaps a statement could have been made, but who knows? Like it could have been, I mean, in my opinion, if you had made the workout 30-20-10, it would have been much safer. If you had made the workout strict ring dips, it would have been much safer. But again, safer after the fact. Like I no one really knows like beforehand that was going to be a thing. It was like complete.
Hey. That was just getting to the climax as well. Just getting to the important point. I've recorded, started recording again. So okay. If you want to just like finish off your point, that's cool.
Yeah. So I was just saying, it was a sort of in my opinion, it's like a no one's to blame type situation. There's certainly like people could take ownership over just even saying like, hey, yeah, this was a risk. Like, but everyone knows it's a risk anyways. Like we sign a waiver for that anyway. But it was just sort of a perfect scenario, perfect storm of scenarios that led to a lot of injuries. And I mean, obviously they're not trying to hurt anybody. It sucks to see that happen, but yeah, I think it was just like physiologically, it was sort of something that people didn't consider or see coming until it's 2020 hindsight. You look at it and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess that makes perfect sense why there's been lots of strains. And I don't know, like maybe people aren't training on rings very much, but I don't think I've seen some things about like it was because of the width of the rings. It was because of the strap height. Like in my opinion, that's all nonsense. Like it's irrelevant. Yeah. But I think it has mostly to do with tightness of muscles moving in and the fast pace of that workout and the reckless nature, especially for the men of the workout.
Nice.
That's just what it is.
Have you seen Julien Pineau's video about it?
I have not.
I definitely checked that out. It's quite interesting. He basically Go ahead.
I said I've been kind of avoiding everything to do with it.
Yeah, I bet you have.
There's just like so much garbage out there, and I see things like, oh.
No, he's on a similar note to you. Like, no one's to blame, but probably just a lack of isolated pec work and not the horizontal progression. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it. Where can people find out a bit more about you, following in the socials, all that kind of stuff?
I have an athlete page on Facebook, just Patrick Vellner, and then I have my Instagram is just @pvellner, and that's pretty much where you can find me most of the time.
Sweet, perfect, man.
Awesome.
And we'll call it a day there. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Alpha Movement's Mindset RX podcast. If you'd like to get exclusive content, more information about upcoming podcasts, and live stream the podcast to get your questions answered, find me, Tom Foxley, all over the socials apart from Twitter, or head over to facebook.com/Alpha Movement Official. If you're listening to the podcast, you're clearly interested in mindset to aid your performance. This is what I've spent years coaching, and now I'm bringing its boxes around the world with my Mindset RX seminar. Chances are over the next year or so, I'll be heading to your box or a box near you to show you how much impact mindset can have on your performance. If you're interested in either hosting or attending the Mindset RX seminars, shoot an email to tom@alphamovement.co and we'll see what we can do. Remember, you can also get your hands on my 2 books, Intensity Tolerance and The Impossible Art of Consistency, by searching for Tom Foxley or Mindset RX on Amazon. Anyone who buys a copy helps directly support this show. So to all of you who have bought coffee, thank you, and I'll see you soon for another episode of the Mindset RX podcast.